about our favorite thing, food. So I gave them the questions ahead of time, so they had a chance to think about it. But I'm curious to both of you, and I'll share a little bit too. Tell me one of your favorite foods when you were little, and one of your favorite foods lately.
I think it's the same answer for me, probably. So growing up, our favorite, my brother's here too, he can probably answer some of the same questions, but our favorite meals usually involve going to some kind of Asian cuisine restaurant. So we did a lot of teriyaki growing up, and there was a restaurant in Westgate called North China that we used to go to, and three boys, pretty rambunctious crew, and apparently at all those meals we would go completely silent for about 30 minutes because we just would stuff our faces with Chinese food. And I think growing up now and becoming an adult, it's kind of the same types of food, but maybe just broadening a little bit beyond kind of the Americanized versions of those foods and trying different restaurants that are a little more authentic maybe, and still enjoying those other ones, but trying new stuff too.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say, and I gave this a good long thought. Anyone who knows me knows I love food. Growing up, and this is a particular, it's hard to say because, again, like a lot of things, but things around bananas, and in India, there are green bananas that you cook in savory ways, and you can eat it with rice and curry. And then there are ripe bananas, plantains, not the kind that you get in American grocery stores here, but plantains that you could cut and batter and fry as a snack, and those were delicious. And so I have really fond memories of visiting aunts and cousins and just any house in India that you'd go to in Kerala, and you'd be served bananas in different varieties. And so I have a real fondness for that. Hard to choose now. I would definitely go with any variety of Thai food or Vietnamese food, so a good pho, especially in this season, which is like broth and noodles and really good, or any kind of green curry or, Thai food.
Okay.
So good.
What
about you?
What about you? Yeah.
What about me? We were born and raised in Ohio, and I feel like that answers the question. Meat, potatoes, green beans, corn, and peas. I love you, Mom and Dad, but that's kind of what we ate, and I just got used to that. So growing up now, I would love to say we've branched out. I have little kids, and that kind of meal train comes back around again. And so my food invitation is to continue to expand and continue to eat in places that are not so Midwest American. And so that's been something I've been trying to put my foot out there. Yeah. So my other question for you all is, were there any food rules or practices in your home growing up?
I thought about this. I think the one that stands out to me was, my family's Norwegian, particularly on my mom's side. My grandparents immigrated from Norway, so we ate a lot, and they lived in the area. We ate with them a lot. And potatoes are a big part of Norwegian food. And I have to admit, I don't enjoy potatoes. I never have. From little to now, I still don't enjoy them very much. I think it's a texture thing, maybe. Anyways. But the rule was you have to at least have a few bites of everything on the plate. And that was how somebody explained to me at one point that if you don't breathe through your nose while you're eating, you can't taste the food that you're eating. And that was how I kind of employed that strategy, was I'll eat these 3 bites of potatoes, I just won't breathe, I'll swallow, and I'll be done. That was the rule for me that I struggled with.
Love it.
I love that. So I think a lot of table culture that I grew up with, again, India, and one of them was that you always, similar to David's household, you always try everything that's on the table. The one I struggled with was that as you're working to finish your plate, inexplicably, whoever is the host was going to say, and some more, and no matter how much you refused, you were going to be served more. And it's rude not to finish your food on your plate, and I just couldn't. And so I got in the habit of eating the things that I really liked first, because then if I was served more, I wasn't resentful. But it was really, really hard to finish. And so as I grew older, I've just gotten more insistent. I'm really, really, it was so good. Thank you so much. Really, I'm full. Another table manner or like rule that we grew up with was if you were in a guest's house, the guests were always served first. So if you were coming to our house, you would be served first before anyone in the household would eat. And if you were in your own family, the oldest person, it would be in descending order. So if our grandparents were home, they would be served food first, and then the youngest would get food. A rule that my parents instituted that wasn't similar to, I think, Indian custom was that you didn't always have to finish your plate. And I so appreciated that because growing up, because of the over-serving, we were expected to eat, but we were never expected to finish it for finishing's sake. And that was, to me, a really gracious way of excusing us from overeating or feeling like we had to abide by that. So it was good.
I love those stories. Mine, and I almost went into our basement to find this, but my family had a clean plate award.
The opposite.
Opposite value.
Yeah.
And my dad built it in his shop. It was this thing of wood. It had this red plastic plate sitting in it. And the goal in 4 kids was to win the award.
Gosh.
And I'm a go-getter, so I kept trying to win it, but then they would serve peas. And I hated the peas. So I have a very specific memory of folding those peas into a napkin. Mom and Dad, I gotta go to the bathroom. Taking that napkin of peas and putting them in the radiator.
Oh, gosh.
In the bathroom. Not the trash can, because they would find it, the radiator. And so I just remember, I don't like this food. And so I think, and we can't get into all of it today, but I know all of us have all these values and dynamics around food that shape us, that may be healthy, may not be. And so we'll continue to reflect on that. Thank you to both of you for sharing a little. So, a couple thoughts about what was going on in our scripture text today and some things for us to be holding and tending in these days. So you should know, a lot of you probably know already, but there is so much going on at the table in any Jesus story that shows up. Like at first glance, it may just seem like this interesting interaction. There's like 20 layers deep of nuance and meaning. And I tell you, Jesus always knows what he's doing. So here's four things that are happening at any table in Jesus' day. There was 4 basic functions. 1, they were supporting kinship. They were creating solidarity. They were strengthening boundaries of who was in and who was out. They were enforcing boundaries of hierarchy and status and gender, especially through who was seated where around that table. They were perpetuating social values at the table. There were certain rituals that were maintained, such as washing and prayers and symbols. There were special feasts being observed. And it was also a way to gain honor. You gained honor through hosting a banquet or through clever discourse as a guest. If you were the funny one that night, you gained more honor in your town. The wealthy people could show off their benevolence. Look how kind I am tonight. And the guests, they gained honor by showing deference or by entertaining with their wit and their wisdom. Friends, Jesus lived in a world where all of these rules were normal. They were assumed. And I think he understood that. When Jesus sits at a table, he knows what he is messing with. And what we watch him almost every single time in a gospel food story, he does not abide by the rules, does he? Like ever. Read through a gospel this week, find the food, watch what Jesus does. He doesn't follow the rules. Quite the opposite. He used every meal as a means of disrupting those values and overturning norms of behavior and honor, because Jesus has a different story to tell about beloved community. We see over and over, especially in the book of Luke, that Jesus used meals to reconfigure who he considered his true kin. Remember when we say kingdom sometimes? Siblings, family in Christ. He was trying to figure out who he considered his true kin. He challenged exclusivism by welcoming everyone to the table. He refused to consider or to continue religious traditions about washing and fasting and even Sabbath regulations. He interrupted all of it. Jesus, this is my favorite part, he often offended both the host and the guests by pointing out their misguided priorities. And let us be clear, Jesus wasn't just choosing a different preference. He assaulted an entire religious system that prioritized rules over people. This was not just dinner chit-chat, right? He used a table, he used a thing that everyone knew to say, you think it's this way, but it is not. There's a better, more beautiful way to do all of this. And friends, if we claim to be Jesus followers, we're invited to do the same. In this story today, we see Jesus at Simon the Pharisee's home. It's an important dinner. The sinful woman enters. She crosses this invisible barrier into the invited, this kind of elite space, and she shocks everyone in attendance with her actions. And we heard Jesus welcoming her, forgiving her, and offering her grace. A story happened in my life this week that I want to share with you, and I want you to know that my daughter gave me permission to share it with you. On Wednesday night, my daughter, 4th grade, nervously told me a story about her lunchroom that day. And she said, Mom, 2 friends who were already seated at another table looked over and saw me sitting by myself. And so they came over and sat with me. And she said, I'm not lonely. It's okay. You don't have to sit here. But they continued to be with her and talk with her, and she was processing this. So we unpacked the story a bit more because her lip was quivering with discomfort. I said, Isabella, do you know why that bothered you? And she looked at the wall for a minute, anything to stall because you don't want to say the hard thing. And then she goes, Mom, they broke the rules. Once we're seated, we're not supposed to move. They broke the rules. And it made my lovely rule-following daughter quite uncomfortable. Right? That's how she knows she's good, if she's following the rules. She's not the only one, is she? I shared with her this story that we're talking about this morning, and that sometimes Jesus broke the rules so he could love people in important ways. We talked about why the school has the rule of not moving around. Yes, we want to keep each other safe during COVID, and that maybe once in a while it's okay that her friends wanted to be with her. And so a word to those of us who can't bear the thought of breaking the rules. There's some of us. If this happens to you in the days to come and there's a rule, an assumption that is presented to you, I invite you to sit with that rule, with that practice, with that assumption. Just sit with that for a moment and ask some questions. Who created it? Maybe it's a good one. Maybe it's not. Why is it necessary? Who does it silence? And who does it ensure has power? Granted, those are some big questions for the elementary lunchroom, but, oh geez, my daughter's gonna get in trouble this week. But in the rest of life, we as adults, I think, know that nuance of that question. Because the elementary lunchroom rule about not moving seats, that's an okay rule. That's okay. All the parents who are sending unvaccinated kids into the building, we love this rule. We love this rule. But some rules, look for the power, look for the control, look for the fear, look for the discomfort. And I encourage you, friends, look for the exclusivity. Look for the othering. Look for the protecting out of fear. If a rule feels more like fear than a loving boundary, I encourage you to intentionally interrupt it. Because here's the thing. You have far more power than you might realize. For my white siblings, especially with us today, know that white dominant culture thrives on us staying quiet. Once we choose to pay attention to inequity and bias and oppressive structures, we see them everywhere. But we've been so long socialized to keep quiet. It's the story in the air that we sometimes don't like to talk about. Problem is, we're part of a faith movement that declares that that kind of silence is wrong. It's not God's dream for any of us. And so white silence is what is allowing hate and oppression to deepen and continue. So please know, your voice is needed. Ask questions. Ask questions about an inequitable rule in your workplace. Say, hey, boss, real quick, can you tell me more about this rule? I'm curious about where this came from, why it started, who does it benefit? I have some concerns about how this really plays out in our workplace or our neighborhood or our family or our community. Share a story at the dinner table about what you're learning lately about practicing an anti-racist life. Write a letter to your school administrator about a class that you would like added to the curriculum. Use your voice. Talk to your elected leaders. My white siblings, we have privilege. We must use it, like Jesus did, to break a few rules, and not just a few, most, it seems, some days. And maybe, you're being invited to interrupt in places that matter to us all. The table, the place with all the food. In a way, isn't the table one of the most sacred places to humans? It's where we're nourished, it's where we're full, it's where we connect. And isn't it, by the way, pandemic friends, what we miss? Does anyone miss sitting in a restaurant without a mask, not thinking about how many feet you are away from every human in the restaurant? We miss the table, which makes the table a really beautiful place to talk about what really matters. So I'm curious, here's my question for you this week. Where might we see ourselves in these stories? Because the beauty of gospel stories is there's a spot for everybody. Some weeks it's over here, sometimes it's here. 10 years later, you're now the other character in the story. It all is there. And so today I'm going to offer you a choose your own adventure option. I'm going to give you 3 thoughts and see if one of them strikes you for further conversation, or make up your own, because you are your own Jesus follower. So for those of you who have been cautious about eating with people outside of your bubble, maybe you'd like to gather outside for a COVID-safe meal with someone new. Some of you are probably already doing this, but for those of you who've been holding it real close, I think we're seeing a lot of evidence that eating outside, distanced, is pretty safe. And so maybe if you've just been kind of waiting for like, can I, should I, is this okay? And granted, do what feels good for you in your situation, but know that I think you can do it fairly safely. And maybe your invitation is, I actually do want to spend time with someone new, eating over food. And I could do this in a safe way. Another option to think about. Is there someone or a group of people whom you find yourself judging or labeling, and thus diminishing their humanity? Spend some time this week exploring why. I think a lot of us do this just kind of naturally, instinctively, so let's question it. How might Jesus invite us to engage with that person or people in a new way? Here's the trick. Do it. Sometimes I think of my faith as a beautiful thought experiment. God, I'll spend some time with you. Okay, I feel very convicted. I should spend some time with that person. I should ask a new question. Cool, okay. But do it. And maybe for you, that's the invitation, is it moves from a thought experience to an actual action. I know I need some accountability sometimes to do that. And a third option. Is there a system that you participate in that routinely prioritizes one group of people over another? Where could you interrupt that? Where could you talk about that? Where could you point that out? Maybe there's a conversation that you could even initiate that can point out, hey, I think this is kind of harmful. Can we talk about this? You could be a part of dreaming of new ways forward. So friends, the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ is that we hold a story of both profound love and comfort and nourishment and profound disruption. Jesus would do anything, it seems, to show people how messed up some of these rules were. And we are invited to break some rules too. So friends, may you love people well this week. May you disrupt and interrupt with courage, maybe even some joy. May you offer compassion to yourself, to others. May you love someone with a different story than yours. And may you know what happens at the table matters. May God's grace and love be the very feast our souls need. Amen.